Coming up, Sandy Dunn joins us to share the insights that she's gained on her unique journey to the role of CISO. And then the company Splunk just acquired, how to change your habits and why it's good to go fast and break things. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by... Are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Hello and welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's episode number 89. We're creeping up on 100. We're recording this live Monday, June 17th, 2018. Actually, it's the 18th.
It's definitely the 18th.
It's definitely the 18th. So it's the summer, and apparently I can't count anymore. Kids are out of school. I can't keep track of it anymore. Look, this is the show where we're exploring the business of security because we want to improve the security of business. So our goal is to be your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. I'm still Michael Santarcangelo, your straight-talking guide. And I spend my time working with both enterprise security teams and vendors. I'm looking at how we overcome that friction and how we translate that understanding, our value into understanding. And apparently this is going to be a tough day for me getting through it. So luckily, joining us from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island is your friend of mine, Paul Asadorian.
You started off great.
and then
Excuse me.
Just tongue-tied, apparently.
Good Lord. We're just a hot mess all of a sudden, Michael. Well, maybe not all of a sudden, but you started off the show great. I love your introduction. I think it's fantastic. My other comment is your caulk board behind you is pretty empty. So
I cleaned it up this weekend. It's time to rethink about the next quarter ahead.
I mean, you must have been super productive to have a clean cork board.
It's a combination of super productive and okay, I didn't get to this yet. I didn't get to this yet. Shit, I didn't get to this yet. So it was a blend. But I actually do have some new goals, and in fact, was spending some time this morning looking at like just the next 3 weeks, like next 2 weeks. To be fair, in fact, just as a quick preview for next week, we're going to go through something called the time audit, and this is something I've been working with both on the vendor side and on the enterprise client side. And it's the answer to that question. Well, what are you working on, and what can you take on? And as I started doing that myself, I went, okay, I've prioritized some of these things a little sooner than I can get to them, but let me think about the best next step. It's funny. I was just following my own advice and realized that if I focused on a couple things a little bit better, I'd get better results. So the board behind me is clear, except for the artwork that my children have donated to me and check every day to make sure it's still there. And so it is.
Oh, yeah. You can't drop the ball on that, dude, because they will call you out.
They know immediately.
They do.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, so my presentation at SERI over the weekend, Michael, I channeled you in front of a crowd of social engineers. Now, what was interesting was, and I thought you'd find this interesting, and our listeners as well, it was a small-ish, it was the first time they ran, excuse me, SERI. They're renaming the conference to Layer 8, the Layer 8 conference, right? And they've got a cool logo. I think it's a much better name than Social Engineering Rhode Island, which is pretty funny, but because it's very self-describing. But So it was about 70 registrants. There was probably a pretty good turnout. I would say 50 or 60 people of that 75 in my estimation.
Solid. That's great. Yeah.
Great turnout. Beautiful location in Newport, Rhode Island. So I started asking folks, because I was still working on my slides at the booth, because long story. But so I was like, hey, like, have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference? And they're like, no. I'm like, you do social engineering as like your job? And like a couple of people, including presenters, are like, yeah, that's what I do. I think it was Summer Lee who I was talking to, and everyone was so nice too. Summer, she's awesome. And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, have you read The Brain Audit by Sean D'Souza? And they're like, no, I haven't. Now, the book that people did read, Michael, was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie, but pretty much the hardcore trio that we have, including Play Bigger, really none of the social engineers, including Chris Hadnagy, who is like he is the human hacker, literally, had not read these books. And we're fascinated how I was able to, and I was, again, like, I wonder if I can pull this off in a presentation, how I was able to relate those to social engineering. So, Michael,
you totally relate those, yeah.
Your work in bringing these books and content to our listeners here has now extended out into the social engineering realm as well. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. It's making me then look at the Robert Cialdini stuff a little bit more. The persuasion, influence. I mean, those are some of the tomes on the topics. But yeah, we'll keep looking at it. I'm actively trying to figure out books for the back half of the year. I'm actually working through some stuff with my kids, believe it or not. Got them new Kindles so that they can start reading some stuff. And we're working through some as a family. And all I'll say so far that I figured out is there's an interesting balance between reading broadly and reading deeply. And I'm trying to figure out what that balance is going to look like, both for me and then therefore for us. But it'll be good stuff.
Awesome.
Let's talk about Sandy.
Yes, let's talk about Sandy.
Before we actually show her picture, Sandy's pretty awesome. And it's I've had a great conversation with her, and she's had such a great story. So I'm really excited about this. So what we'll say is she's the CISO for a medical insurance company, and she currently resides in beautiful Idaho. But her path is fascinating. Like this is an easy conversation, but I'll tell you, she's also what I've really appreciated, Sandy, because I know you're listening, obviously, as you come on board. The things that you're willing to talk about and give voice to are fascinating because these are the things that we need. And so she's here today to share some of the lessons that she's learned. So Sandy, welcome finally to Business Security Weekly.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's exciting. All right, so let's start with the easy stuff, I guess. So how did you get to be a CISO? Did you just wake up one morning and say, I know what I want to be when I grow up?
So I started taking a bunch of SANS classes, and I shared with you and with Paul that really at the start of my security career, how I started learning about security was I started downloading Paul.com podcasts. And Twitchy and Larry and Paul would go through all of the different tools and different events that happened that week. And my homework would be to go figure out everything that they were talking about. So as I started down that journey, they would talk about SANS all the time. So I jumped in, and as soon as I could get someone to pay for my first SANS class, I took the SANS 401, became a SANS mentor, and then just kept trying to learn. So so as I started down that path, I'm actually friends with Carrie Roberts. And she had jumped into the SANS Master's program, the engineering Master's program, and she pushed me to go get my Master's in Information Security Management from SANS.
Now, how long was that program?
It took me about 3.5 years to get through it. Part of the problem was my gold papers. Like I never figured out how to scope my gold papers, and I would spend like hours and way too long doing research, and it took me just forever to get through them.
I just want to say, Sandy, thank you for listening. Back then, certainly, and we still have that today, and I'm still kind of surprised that people listen, because we're like, well, we're just a bunch of people that like to drink and talk about security, so let's do a podcast. And there's always a lot of shenanigans that go on, especially on Paul's Security Weekly. And so I'm glad you were, and obviously people got value from it, and you did as well, which is awesome. And then continue down the SANS route, which is pretty cool. Carrie's a super smart individual. I love Carrie. She's awesome. So
yeah, she's very smart.
How did you like managing the workload and doing school at the same time? Or at least did you, Like somebody else sitting here now saying, whoa, that's interesting. Because I picked up two things quick. Listening to the stuff that we talk about on a program like this, and now we have 7, 8 programs depending on your likes. That's a lot of really good way to break something down and apply it. But then you're also layering in a highly structured and respected program like SANS. How did you manage your time?
I did not sleep very much, and there were times when like I took out things that weren't necessary, like showering. You're just like, you're just like, you get in the zone and you're just like, I got to get through this. And I will say that your family sacrifices with you. I mean, my daughter didn't get to go to a lot of things because mom was always back there writing papers and studying.
Yeah,
of course, now she's a world-class hacker, so it's okay.
Yeah, there's certainly some impact to your family and social life when you're doing that stuff, and having people to support you is super important.
Yeah, if you're planning on it, just go in with your eyes wide open that you're not the only person that you have to think about.
Yeah, that's solid advice for sure. So did you always know, like through all the studying, that you were going to be a CISO? Was that a goal that you had identified, or did you kind of just fall into the role?
So I had, as I progressed, I started out in competitive intelligence, and that's when I first started listening to your show, the Paul.com show. And then as I progressed through roles at HP, I became an information security officer, and I identified where I was the most value was the bridge between the business and security, like being able to break down, being able to talk to both camps and help them find kind of the best path forward. So I did want to be a CISO. So I was with HP for 15 years in various roles. I started out as a contractor. I was a contractor for 6 years and then was a full-time employee. And then I was looking for the next challenge. And I've always believed that security people don't necessarily join companies, we join teams. And there was another really great team in town, and they just rocked. The people were awesome. Everyone, they seemed to be always on the cutting edge of doing smart things. And they had an opening for an IT security architect. So I applied for that, and I accepted that position. And part of the reason that I changed companies was the CISO who was in the role at that company, I really admired. He was really good at building teams. He was really good at talking to the business. He was just a great person. And I thought, okay, in my career path as a mentor, learning from this person how to be a great CISO will help me, when I finally get to be a CISO. And I was there for a month and a half, and he left. And they walked him out the door the next day and put me in as interim. And I was like, okay, I've only been here a month and a half. I really don't know that much about being a CISO. Okay, let's go. Let's do this. So thankfully, I had a really great team. We really tackled it as a group. We had another security, the SecOps manager left a month later. And I was like, that was kind of a tipping point for me. I was just trying to keep the plane in the air, keep us headed in the right direction, and make sure we didn't go backwards. And when he left, I was like, uh-oh, the plane's going to crash. And I was able to backfill him very quickly. He was able to train the person who took over his role. So, just had the right people supporting me and kind of coaching me in the right direction. Now I've been the CISO. I was interim from February to August, and I've been a full-time CISO since August.
Did anything change when you went from interim to full-time?
Absolutely, because as interim, I had all of the responsibility without any of the authority. And I couldn't really develop my plan I couldn't develop a strategy. I couldn't really talk about what my vision was because I didn't really know what I was. Am I the CISO? I couldn't even sign things. I couldn't hire people. So it was truly a challenge.
That's interesting. All right. So one of the things then, and there's a lot here for us to talk about, but one of the things that's really interesting to me is you and I talked about questions, and you specifically said you're not afraid of asking a dumb question. It's one of those things that you and I quickly bonded over because I feel the same way. So let's talk about that. Like, what does that mean? Is that something that came out of your competitive intelligence background? Is that something you had already? Like, what does it mean by a dumb question? Like, when you say that, what has that experience been for you, and what are the benefits that you get with your willingness to just keep asking questions?
Well, so at HP, I mean, there's just volumes of absolutely brilliant people, but a lot of them are academically brilliant. And so I would just, of course, do my own research before I would go talk to them. But then when I was trying to connect the dots, it's, if I didn't get it, I was honest about it. I'd say, you know what? I'm sorry, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand how this will ever be viable. I don't understand how this talks to this, how this talks to this. I don't understand how we can say this is secure when we're getting the files and email from China. That doesn't make sense to me. And so the more I was transparent about not understanding the process, I would see other people being willing to say, well, yeah, we didn't get it either, but we didn't want to look dumb.
Yeah, and so I that's the distinction I want to make, is that a lot of times we'll say, oh, that's a dumb question. And a lot of times it's not. You're asking a question that other people have that they're reluctant to ask because they don't want to be cast as being dumb. How did you get over that? Is that just innate to you? You just, hey, I don't understand, I'm going to ask the question? Or is it something that you've intentionally practiced and built up?
So you're asking, am I dumb by default or dumb on purpose?
I didn't think of it that way, but I think that's exactly what I'm asking.
Okay.
Oh my God, that was awesome. Sorry.
That was really good.
I would say it was just a willingness to not try to be the expert in the room, because I wasn't. Everyone else was measuring their last research paper, and I didn't have that baggage. I was willing to say, I don't understand. This does not make sense to me. But part of it's just persistence. And a lot of times, if I was to look back and say, okay, what were the things that were that made me successful? It was really durability. It was, I would send out emails needing information for a report I was writing or from somebody, and I'd send them, my strategy was I'd send them 3 emails. When they didn't respond, I'd go figure out where their desk was, and I'd walk up and say, hi, I've sent you 3 emails. I'm sure you're busy. You might have missed them, but I really need that information. Could you have it by tomorrow? And, and if they didn't respond to that, I was back the next day. And finally, I got to the point where they just responded to the first email because they knew I wouldn't give up.
That's fantastic.
That's interesting. And Evan just gave a presentation about applying sales tactics to social engineering. What I just got from that, Sandy, was applying sales tactics such as persistence to your career within the organization, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes you need information from someone or the other, and you just have to be persistent about getting it, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's where I came from, Paul. I actually came out of sales. I started in, when I got out of college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be. I started in radio sales, got into software sales, got into PC sales. You do learn. I mean, the most important thing about that is understanding your customer.
Mm-hmm.
What do they need? What's important to them?
Well, yeah, now you've hit on something that we talk about a lot, and I did in my talk as well, is understanding what other people need. Right. And that it plays into sales, but I'm like, wow, this applies to a lot of other things too.
Yeah. And salespeople get a bad name, but the truth is we're all salespeople, right?
Yep.
If I want a new horse, I've got to go pitch it to my husband and convince him that, hey, we absolutely need this new horse.
That's your
Sandy,
hobby.
Has he ever said no? I'm just asking. I'm just curious.
That is my hobby, is horses.
Okay.
I mean, you ask what was my
some
career
sales
path?
are easier than others.
Yes, that's true. What motivated me was the need for more hay. I mean, that was my career path.
Well, now I want to go back to something about the persistence too, because I think this is a nuance, and maybe I'm wrong. My instinct here, Sandy, though, is that if you asked the question and you said, okay, I'm going to send 3 messages, you weren't asking frivolous questions. You had a purpose. You were asking something that you needed in order to move forward. And if somebody pressed you, like, why do you need this? You could explain it to them, as opposed to just, hey, I'm over here, hey, I'm over here, hey, I'm over here,
Right.
hey, this is really important. Like, so then your reputation was built on, if Sandy's asking for something, she needs it, and she's going to follow up on it until she gets it. But by the way, she's not wasting our time, so just go ahead and give it to her up front. Is that fair to say that you didn't waste people's time with your questions? They were things that were important and necessary, and therefore your reputation was, you weren't a time waster, but you kind of needed the results.
Right. And I would also highlight that I always did my own research. I found as much information as I could on my own before I went and had to seek out that person's valuable time to ask them to help me.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think it's important too if you're in sales, you're in marketing, or anything else. Understanding what somebody needs or what they want and trying to figure out what you want is good. But doing that little bit of respect up front makes a big difference. Now, what's interesting too is I think one of your strengths is, and you've talked about how you weren't really trained on how security is supposed to be, and that you're interested in process, you're intellectually curious. All these things are really fascinating to you. So how has that played out in the way that you're crafting the role of CISO and how you're helping your organization improve security?
Yeah, I think it's basically that same hacker mentality where I related to the hacker culture because I didn't just follow the rules because it was a rule. I needed to understand the why. And so going in and someone would say, well, we always do it this way. And I'd always say, well, why? Why do we always do it that way? That doesn't make sense to me. And so, I would say that's definitely been, that kind of hacker mentality of not accepting rules for the sake of rules.
You know what? I love that. I love that just because I feel like a lot of times in security, we enforce, or I like to say, inflict rules for the sake of rules. And then when pushed back, people go, oh, I don't know, because that's how we do it. Yeah. It seems, though, that because you're willing to say, no, what are we trying to actually get done? And ask those questions that other people are reluctant to ask, you're kind of getting where you need to be. How does that tie into then, and I've had this come up a bunch recently, this idea of pushing left in the organization or shifting left in the organization. You and I touched on it briefly. How is that unfolding for you?
Yeah, I sent you a presentation I just did for the local data governance committee, and I talked about emergencies where it's like, I think what's very common in the cybersecurity field is we just get exhausted. I mean, there's just everything's urgent, everything's an emergency. A new bug just came out that's going to take down the business, and you get to the point where you're just like, if you compare it to the little boy who cries wolf and you're a villager, you don't even care if he cries wolf anymore. You actually hope the wolf eats the sheep so you can go home and get some sleep and see your family. You're just like done. I'm like, I can't handle another fire. And so I think that what I've been really driving my team to do is if something gets to an escalation or, oh my God, this is broken, we got to fix it. How did it get there? And, we're not done when we fix the problem. We're done when we fix how it got there, and when we fix the process in general. I mean, if someone needs to hook up to something in the firewall, well, how come we didn't know that beforehand? Is that part of our requirements process that got skipped? Why? How did it become a fire? So really trying to understand requirements up front. And being in the healthcare industry, I think one of the things that was surprising when I got here was just how conservative it was. But there's a reason for that, because the risk is so high. Every decision that we make, comes with heavy consequences. So decisions are made very carefully. And so right now we're actually at a point where we're trying to make massive changes, and that has increased a lot of churn and kind of new territory. So really helping people say, just going fast may create a bigger disaster for us in the end than, having that new widget on somebody's mobile phone. Really understanding the benefit to our members of trying to introduce. Yes, they want this, but at what cost? And understanding the process, from the very beginning, understanding security requirements up front. I can't tell you how many meetings I get pulled into and they go, okay, we're releasing this into production next week. Can you tell us, is this secure? I'm like, what? What is it? What does it do? What data is it handling? Who's it touching? Who's logging into it? I can't tell you, what it is until I know, what do we need to protect? Who do we need to protect it from? And then we decide how we're going to protect it. So one of the things that I use as an example is if someone came up to me and said, "Is your truck secure?" I'd say, "Absolutely. It's a 110 Dodge. It's 4-wheel drive, brand new tires. It's very secure." And they'd say, "Well, you're going to be carrying President Trump and plutonium. Is it secure?" And I'd be, "Absolutely not." You have to understand those requirements up front before you can ever decide whether or not you have the right solution at the end.
That's right. What do you mean by secure? I want to go back because I love the idea of if something gets to an escalation point, and the way I would even look at it, if I might add a dimension, is, and it's creating unplanned work.
Unplanned work. Thank you, Michael. Yes, I was just
go into it and say, okay. And by the way, I've got this, and we'll talk about this more next week. The way I distinguish it is there's planned work, there's anticipated work. So those of us that are highly responsive, the answer isn't, well, I can't plan for it. You can anticipate it and you can budget for it. And then there's the unplanned work, and those are the fire drills. I love that. How much time are you finding it's taking then to kind of go back and do those postmortems and engineer or re-engineer the processes? Is this a lot of time, or as you're working into it, it's just a little bit, because it feels to me like there's a little bit of discipline required for this. But my experience is the payoff is worth it. How's that unfolding for you, Sandy?
No, I think for me was, and I think, I can't remember if we talked about it, Michael, or not, but I had read the Phoenix Project or listened to the Phoenix Project several years ago and absolutely loved it. But, and, everyone who's in security or in IT can relate to that book. But then I listened to Beyond the Phoenix Project with John Willis and Gene Kim, and that was just, it was almost like I was just at a point of exhaustion. We had just gone through, just fire drill after fire drill after fire drill, and it's almost like an alcoholic finding, the 7 steps, at their lowest point. I got that book and I started listening to it. I was like, oh, thank God. And immediately, like I listened to it over an entire weekend. I just listened to it nonstop, and it came in Monday morning. I was so excited. I was just like, this is it. This is what we got to do. We have to fix this, and went out and listened to the goal. And I think the really fascinating thing to me is you look at the goal. It was written in 1984. It's like, we know how to fix this. How come we can't do it?
Yep, I'm with you, Sandy, and I think the thing that I pulled from that is, for our listeners, that the Beyond the Phoenix Project is a newer offering, a newer book, and I found that the most helpful. Now, I don't think you can just go listen to that. I think you have to listen or read the Phoenix Project, then you have to do the Beyond the Phoenix Project, then maybe the goal, and then there was a Beyond the Goal, because they mirrored that process, and all of those are important, but that going from the Phoenix Project to listening to Beyond the Phoenix Project, the value I got from Beyond Phoenix Project was unbelievable. And it sounds like you had a similar experience, so it wasn't just me.
Yeah, no, I was so excited about it. I've been handing out the Phoenix Project like the Gideon Bible here. I mean, like, I give it away, like, out of my own pocket, like, please read this.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so what is it about the Beyond the Phoenix Project? For me, I feel like it helped me, and I hate the analogy, but put the expression, put the rubber to the road, but it kind of helped me understand how to implement what concepts were covered in the Phoenix Project. Was that what it was like for you too?
Well, and probably the what it helped me conceptualize the most was I started thinking in manufacturing plant terms. Like, I started when I go into a meeting and I talk to people now, I go, okay, if you look at it this way, we were producing 100 cars and now we're trying to produce 1,000 cars, and we never upgraded the manufacturing plant. That's a problem. Of course we're going to have problems. So it actually helped me probably explain to people what the problems were in our own environment in a method that they could understand.
Yeah.
Systems thinking, right? It's the easy way to guide people in the system thinking without freaking them out. How do you find then that when you say, "Hi, I'm from security, and I want to ask a couple of questions so we get this better," are people pushing you away and saying, "Oh, Sandy, we're so busy, we don't have time"? Or are they saying, "Wow, this is great. Yeah, here's how we work, and that'd be great to do more"? Or is it somewhere in between? What's the experience been?
Yeah, so I feel really fortunate about that. I mean, people here at this organization absolutely believe that we want to protect our information. So I have the 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 people they want to do the right thing, they just don't know how.
Yep.
And so I spend a lot of time educating. I do that, like we had a capture the flag event last week. We do cyber tips in the weekly newsletter. I'm kind of using that same, I'm kind of hacking the human of, if I help people protect their information, they're going to help me protect my information. It's always water on a rock. And, back to Christian, I think Masha touched on this too. I always make sure that they know that, I want them to be successful. We're partners in the business success. I understand that without them doing business, nobody has a job here, not even the security team. We can be the best security team ever, but if the business isn't successful, then we failed. So making sure that they see us as non-threatening. Even we had a phishing vendor in here when I first came into this position, and the language when you clicked on it and you failed was kind of like, oh, hey, you dummy, why did you click on that? And I was like, absolutely not. We will.
Right.
I want people to always see security as an enabler and never see us as the jerks that come around trying to make their life difficult.
I love that new approach. Also, I think you're the first guest who has done the callbacks to other guests for us. So thank you so much, because that makes it really easy for us. Now, what's interesting then is that what you're saying here is we can't keep telling people no. So you're, on one hand, you're struggling to keep pace and trying to figure out how to improve the systems and the processes. On the other hand, you don't want to be the party of no anymore. You need to get there and work with people and elevate them through it. But that kind of creates this interesting reality for you, because we've seen where security is used in a lot of places, legitimately or otherwise, as the scapegoat. So now as the CISO, what are you afraid of having to fall on your sword at some point, or where does that enter into this process for you?
Yeah, I think you and I kind of talked a little bit about that. Was kind of when Alex Stamos was at his kind of went through kind of the churn at Facebook. I commented to you that I think that every CISO knows at some point they're going to be either agree with the C-suite, or they're going to have to disagree, and they're going to have to make a personal choice about how that will impact them. You may have to fall on your sword and say, I don't approve of this, and you get fired and you go find the next job. I think that for me, I know where the line is. I know where ethically I will not do something that I don't agree with. That my first mission is to protect the members' data here. That is my number one mission. And if that's ever compromised, then I have to take a stand.
Yeah, and I think that's the risk, especially in today's world, that being a CISO runs, and you really got to stick to your guns. Like Alex did, and I'm sure many other CISOs that we haven't heard about yet. Right. You have to stick by your morals and say, eventually it could reach a crossroads where I just got to leave because it's not for me anymore.
Yeah, you have to protect, and I feel very strongly about protecting my team. I mean, I tell them all the time that that's my job, is to step in front of the moving train. Like, their job is to protect the environment. My job is to step in front of the moving train. And so, and there's different tools. I partner with compliance. I partner with legal. We have a risk acceptance form that is pretty aggressive. That calls out the risks and I ensure that executives have to sign it that shows that they're accepting the risk. So that when you force someone to sign something that says I'm accepting $2 million worth of risk, they'll pause. They'll say, maybe we can wait until this assessment is done, or maybe we can wait until we have that control in place that you're recommending.
I love adding the quantification to it, as opposed to some nebulous.
Yeah.
You accept the risk? Yeah. Risk, it's good all day. Nope. Here's how much you're accepting, and here's what it means. That's a great element to it. I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up, because I think it's one of those things that we talk about quietly. We see someone else fall on their sword, or someone else get shown the door, and we go, but wait, hold on. Well, what would happen there? Well, could that happen to me? And I think it's fair, because that enters into it. And I think other executives in other parts of an organization might at times feel the same way, but there's a certain turbulence to security right now. and a certain set of demands that I'm not sure are always realistic. And taking on the role means fighting some battles that are not so clear yet. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're doing it. It sounds, I mean, everything that I've heard, your team they're lucky to have you guiding them through all of this. And as are the members, protecting their information. So that's fantastic. I appreciate it. I mean, Paul's been, doing this longer, but it's been really fascinating for me, Sandy, to see how you're proof that we can advance in this field and we can learn new things and we can bring these ideas together and we can share them and get better with it. That's all really exciting to me. So thanks a ton for coming on the Business Security Weekly and sharing that and sharing those insights with us and helping us connect some of those dots. So that's a blast.
I really appreciate your persistence, Sandy, and your willingness to learn and consume content and integrate that into your job. I think you've done a phenomenal job of that. I think your t-shirt needs to be I ride horses and I know things. I think that's your shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Or right. I'm dumb by whatever. That's gonna remember that one for the future. That was awesome. All right. Well, so that was good stuff. We're gonna take a quick break, which is a great chance to go to securityweekly.com. You can check us out, sample our shows, engage with our on-demand content, get your journey kick-started the direction you want to go. And when we come back, Paul and I are going to discuss some quick updates to the programming, some surveys we're going to be working on, innovation, insights, everything you need to power your week and have an awesome summer is with us in a minute right when we come back.